welcome to SoftCover. Today we're joined by Tushar Gandhi, the great-grandson of Mohandas and Kasturba Gandhi, to talk about his new book, The Lost Diary of Kastur, my Ba. Here's the book. Thank you so much for joining us today. So the story of how you chanced upon this original manuscript is also really interesting. So my first question for you today is, how are you so sure that this was Kasturba Gandhi's diary?
One is that they found it amongst the Kasturba Trust in Indore, their belongings. It was left over there, and on reading it, it left no doubt about the fact that it was the dates corresponded to the dates of her incarceration. Her locations were from other historical records could be ascertained that the location she mentions, where she is, Kasturba was at those locations on those dates. So, and then when you read the language and the narrative,
Right.
It's in a very colloquial Saurashtra, Kathiawad, Gujarati language. And Kasturba all her life spoke in that language. And because she wasn't literate, she wrote the spoken language. And the whole diary is written in the spoken voice and language. And so in my mind, there is no doubt about the fact. And somebody who could write with such intimate knowledge of Bapu, his habits and things, had to be somebody who had a very, very close relationship with Bapu.
And you made the choice to kind of keep her language, keep her intonation.
See, this is basically her diary. I am just, if you can say so, the medium between the reader and Ba. And so I did not have a right to impose myself on this book. And so it was a dilemma. Initially, it was a dilemma. I wanted to write my kind of language. And then I said, no, that would not be correct, because the experience I was getting of actually sensing Ba while reading her diary, I could not deprive the reader of that. And when first I submitted my manuscript to the publisher, the editor was horrified. And she said, what kind of English is this? How can we associate with such English? And I said, look, this is Ba's language, and unless we transmit that experience to the readers, there's no point in publishing Ba's diary. And I'm very happy that they agreed with it. And so I had to actually write an author's note saying that the wrong English was a conscious decision to in this book. And I had to explain that. And so you see a bit of a difference between my translation of the diary and my notes to explain what Ba was referring to, and places where her entries were very cryptic.
Right. It's so fascinating because, especially the period that the diary is written between, it's very simple. Prayers at 4, woke up, ate this, spun these many strands, read the Gita.
Gargled.
And it's just so interesting because she wrote this diary in 1933, and that was in the middle of the freedom struggle. So it's almost at odds with what you would expect her public life to be like.
Yes, and it also, we must remember that the struggle had separated the couple.
Right.
Bapu was in a different jail, Ba was in a different prison. For the first time, she was a prisoner because of her own actions and not because accompanying her husband kind of thing. Because this general feeling about it is Ba used to accompany her husband even to prison. Well, this diary lets the reader know that, no, that was not right. Every time Ba went to prison, it was because of her own defiance of the British that she courted arrest and was in prison on her own. And so it is a very important period of their life. The nationwide freedom movement was in a state of flux because the Namak Satyagraha had ended, and for some time there was this run up to the Round Table Conference, and in the expectation that the British would capitulate, and so everything was in a hiatus, waiting for that. And then when they realized that no, the Round Table Conference was a sham and didn't work out, to restart the whole thing again needed another impetus, which was not present. Right. And so Ba also writes in her diary that she feels anxious about the state of satyagraha and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I have a quick follow-up question to what you said about her and her satyagraha, like going to jail as a satyagrahi. I think the first time that happened was in South Africa when Gandhi almost sort of told her, if you have a problem with our marriage not being recognized, go to jail and protest. Yeah. So it seems, it's almost like he kind of forced her to go to prison as a satyagrahi. How do you think that prepared her for her future role as his partner in India?
Well, I think she was mentally prepared much before Bapu manipulated her into becoming a satyagrahi in South Africa, because she was witnessing members of her family, immediate family, and the ashram family courting arrest, joining the satyagraha. Because even in South Africa, all the satyagrahas began from the ashram. It was the ashram people, the Phoenix settlement people, who were the first group of satyagrahis to go and protest. And so Ba was watching that. Her elder son, Harilal, had become a very seasoned satyagrahi and jail goer along with her husband. She was watching her second son, Manilal, preparing, even while he was in the ashram, preparing to join the satyagraha. And so she realized that one fine day it's going to be my turn also. And she prepared herself mentally. And so when at one point of time, Bapu sort of manipulated her and said, if you are hurt so much, if you're angry so much, go do something about it. Right. It just was that she realized that, okay, this is my time now and I have to do it. So she had prepared herself. And it wasn't as if Bapu pushed her into things. And I think she was ready for that transition much earlier.
You mentioned Manilal, your grandfather. Something you describe as a Himalayan blunder in the book is when Gandhi sort of stepped in and didn't allow Manilal to marry their Muslim family friend Fatima. And Ba didn't even know about this. How do you think she would have responded to that?
I think she would have been disturbed a bit about it. She was conventional. She was an orthodox Hindu person practicing all the rituals and all the taboos and prejudices.
Yeah.
And so she would have been disturbed, but she had the capacity of accepting things. If you later on, if you look at the fact that Harilal actually converted to Islam and then reconverted to Hinduism, Ba writes a very strong letter of condemnation. But to her son, she writes that please come back to the fold and make your peace with your religion and with your family, because we are willing to welcome you with open arms. So she had the maternal instinct, the love, the bond is not that easy to sever. And I think that is where Bapu kept her in the dark. And that's why I call it his Himalayan blunder, because he used Ba as an excuse to tell his son that, it would destroy her. I don't think it would have destroyed her. Ba was made of much stronger metal than anybody gave her credit.
I mean, in the book, you mentioned that he wrote that Ba was born to endure shocks and, she has to pay the heaviest price. What do you think is the heaviest price she paid?
I think the heaviest price she paid was losing her eldest surviving son, Harilal. She had to live with that because, you must remember that there were two men she loved immensely, at war with each other, and she couldn't take sides
Mm.
because she had realized that if you look at it from the individual's point of view, both of them were right, and yet she had to choose her husband over her son.
Yeah.
But she also realized that her husband was not wrong, although her son kept feeling that the father was wrong. And I think that must have taken a big prize from her, seeing her son destroy himself, plummet to such levels of deprivation and unable to do anything. At every stage, she pleads with him to come back into the fold, come back into the fold. But he Harilal sort of had just decided that this is my revenge on my father, not realizing that the revenge was costing his mother the dearest. And so I think Ba suffered that, and I think that was the greatest tragedy she had to live with.
I think even in the letter that she writes to her son after he converts to Islam, she says, "I'm glad that you at least found some faith."
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really stuck out to me because she was a product of her times. She was, bound to the same kinds of beliefs that everybody that was then, but she still had the thing to write to her son and be like, "I'm glad that you found some faith."
Right. And even then, she sees the silver lining on the dark cloud, saying that even in Islam, if you're going to become a better human being than what you are, I will accept it, and I'll be happy that at least you have become a better human being. Even that is denied to her. She doesn't have the pleasure of saying, okay, he's given up on his religion, he's taken to another faith, he's taken another identity, but my son has become a better man.
Yeah.
And she doesn't get the pleasure of even feeling that. So that is where her grief is there, that come on now, at least change, improve, and that also doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, she had to sacrifice a lot. You address Gandhi's struggle with celibacy and abstinence in the beginning, in your introduction to the diary.
Yeah.
And you also address, her response to their sex life or lack thereof. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Like, what would it have been like for her to have her husband make this decision?
She had realized much before that her husband made decisions or took decisions which were pretty drastic for a normal human being, and it was a lone decision. He didn't consult anybody. He didn't confer with anybody. He thought about it and he implemented. And he implemented it in the most harsh manner possible on himself and those closest to him. She had experienced that in other things. And so when on multiple times, because even Bapu has admitted that he decided on celibacy many a times, but he succumbed to passion many times, and his resolve wasn't strong enough. And none of the times did Ba rebuke him or make fun of his weaknesses. She just accepted him back. As long as he was staying away, she never forced him or went out of her way to seduce him or anything. But when he came to her, she accepted him. She did not ask him what happened to your vow or said, "Oh, you're still weak, huh?" That kind of a thing. No, it was natural for her. But the time he finally took the vow, and she realized that this time it seems to be serious and he seems to be firm on it. She accepted it. But you must also remember that she was at that point of time, she was at a stage in life where the last two pregnancies had been, or childbirths had been very, very traumatic and a very
hard on her.
Hard births on her, took a huge toll on her health. And so after 5 conceivements and pregnancies and births, she must have also felt a bit of relief that, okay, now at least my body can recuperate without having to, be drawn upon with another pregnancy. But she had reached that stage also. So it, at one level, it might have been a relief for her also.
Mm-hmm.
And in an Indian conventional orthodox marriage, sex or physical intimacy, and after a point, were not that prime purpose in a relationship anymore.
Right.
So you must also remember that the culture, the period at which time all this was happening.
Right, right. How do you think she sort of reconciled her husband's very public image with who he was privately at home? Because that sort of started disappearing from her, right? She had to be separated from him from so long. She became, you touch upon this in your book, how she became aware of him as a public persona. But how do you think she reconciled with it?
I think it was gradual, because in South Africa there was still a public and private person. The
Mm-hmm.
change became more and more stark post the Phoenix ashram, where there was a persona of him. He was away for such a long time. He was shuttling between Johannesburg and Phoenix and prison, and so slowly that private house image of him was fading away, and he was becoming a public persona. Also, when he decided to embrace poverty and give up things, she realized that, this man doesn't go and preach to people. He implements things in his own life first. And I will have to be prepared for that, because he's not going to come and consult me. He's going to come and tell me. And so she has resigned to these multiple decisions about the relationship in stages, but at very regular intervals. She has realized that, okay, now this is what my husband has become, and I have to accept that.
Yeah, actually, do you think that historical figures like her should be studied under the 2022 lens, like today? How do you think we should be seeing her?
No, I don't think that's fair. I don't think we should. We should have the maturity to judge somebody from the period of time they were in and their actions from during that time. Because, see, even for us to reach the 2022 level has taken a long transition, even in our lives, the younger lot. I'm not comparing me, but in your life, the stages of evolution of the psyche, of the character, of the morality and everything have taken time. They've been gradual. They've not been as slow as they were with my generation. They've been much more rapid. But there have been stages. And so we should be also magnanimous enough to say, no, let me go and judge this character from the period of his or her lifetime.
Right.
And not from the period of my lifetime, because they do not exist in my life period.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess this brings me to my last question. Gandhi seems like a very difficult husband. Why do you think that so many famous men in history let down their female partners? Do you think he let her down?
To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent, if we are going to evaluate Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi on the yardstick of a conventional husband, yes, he fails miserably. Mm-hmm. But then, are we also going to look at him and judge him on his public persona of the Mahatma? And if we do that, would we be fair to anybody, not just Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, but to all the great people whom we have given iconic status? Mm-hmm. We have to accept the fact that at one point of that time, we have to start looking at that person on the basis of the iconic stature, and not as we would evaluate a normal human being of our caliber or our capacity. Because the iconic status is because we have convinced ourselves that they were something special.
Yeah.
And then to sit down and put the definitions of a normal human being and say, no, on this yardstick he fails or she fails, would not be fair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ba seems like a woman of infinite patience and calm and character. And thank you so much for bringing us her Lost Diary. This is The Lost Diary of Kastur, My Ba by Tushar Gandhi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. In my life, the greatest regret for me was that I never got to be in their presence and learn things. And for this first time, when I was reading the diary, it felt as if I was sitting in Ba Kutir and Ba was speaking to me. Yeah.
That was really lovely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.